hope I learned something. I hope I learned something. I hope I learned something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny days. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny days.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to the daily All Hat No Cattle News Rodeo. I'm your host, Pat. Hello, YouTube, T-Live, Trovo, and Twitch. Welcome to us all. Coming to you on the broad expanse of a fiber internet system. I love it to death. The morning streams just look great. Really, really good quality. And when I remember to have things set up properly for the afternoon, all four channels also work then as well. How nice it is to have things go the way they're supposed to go. So anyway, lots to get to today. We have some very, very troubling congressional testimony from a Microsoft exec yesterday regarding the number of times they're asked to not only provide information from their systems to Washington federal law enforcement agencies, but also how often they're put under secrecy obligations, which means they can't tell the people whose data is being riffled through about it, thereby leaving them open to all kinds of further possibly incriminating behavior. Or just being normal people and having their stuff riffled through pardon me, rifled through. I don't know. I said rifled through with no clear jurisprudence justification whatsoever. Also, in the opening block, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled regarding a 2016 Arizona voting law that was challenged under the 1964 Voting Act, Civil Rights Voting Act. Got an interesting 6-3 decision there. And then finally, for the YouTube block, the Illinois legislature is putting a bill in front of Fat Man Pritzker's desk that will force school districts to put feminine hygiene products in boys' bathrooms as well as girls' bathrooms in grades 4 through 12. We have a very, very full Law and Order block to carry through the rest of the show. Kenosha recently ruled regarding a petition for damages by one Jacob Blake, the person responsible for the rioting we had here last August. No surprise there, actually, but the rest of the story is what really brings it home. Seattle and Portland are both throttling their law enforcement even further. Now, a really interesting story in Seattle from last year regarding an Antifa, quote-unquote, activist who has been allowed to skip through the justice system over and over again despite a history of violent crimes. And then finally, we have one story from the COVID block today regarding former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's admonition that this last leak from the Wuhan lab, possible leak from the Wuhan lab, may not be the only time we're going to see something like this, and the next time could be even worse. But we will get to that in the after show. So let us begin, as we always do, with our first Babylon Bee bookend. This is the one on the left from their politics section. We at the NSA are not spying on you, insists muffled voice coming from Tucker Carlson's toaster. And here we have a pensive Tucker seated with a toaster with 2 perfectly toasted slices of bread popping out of it, and Tucker's wondering where's that voice is coming from. Dateline Boca Grande, Florida. Fox News host Tucker Carlson has been going back and forth with the NSA, with the television commentator insisting the NSA is spying on him. The agency, however, has denied the claim, saying, quote, "We at the NSA are not spying on you and have never spied on you," in a tinny, muffled voice coming from his toaster this morning. Quoting Carlson, "I just can't believe the NSA would spy on me," he muttered while eating his typical breakfast of 2 dozen eggs, 14 strips of bacon, and a full tub of pre-workout powder. His toaster replied indignantly, "We are not spying on you." "What the?" Carlson shouted, jumping up and spilling bacon everywhere. How does one spill bacon? Seinfeld reference. Quote, "We at the NSA are not spying on you and have never spied on you. We know nothing about you, like, for instance, that you enjoy the occasional slice of avocado toast with your breakfast, or that you have a tiny Tweety bird tattoo on your lower back. We cannot know these things because we do not spy on American citizens without the proper court authorization. Have a great day." Close quote. A freaked-out Carlson smashed the toaster to pieces with his bare fist and proceeded to frantically destroy appliances. The NSA has said they are sorry for the incident and gifted Tucker with a hollowed-out wooden statue of Trump with suspiciously moving eyes by way of apology. The Babylon Bee, everyone, getting us off to a roaring start. And next up, of course, my personal conceit, the market. A mixed day today, but barely. The Dow was up just a tick over 0.35% today, closing at 34,600 and change. Then the S&P was up 0.5% exactly as of this moment, and the Nasdaq futures dropped 0.0005%. Gold, a very small surge, going up a little over $50 and $5.60 an ounce. Silver dropped a little bit. Crude oil is marching its way up well past $75 a barrel. It's up over 2% at the moment, currently trading at $74.94 per barrel of West Texas Intermediate Sweet Crude. I have a story on gas prices coming up, by the way. The numbers, as I'm sure you all know, are not good at all. Moving right along.
Hannity.
Oops.
All right, today you're...
Sorry, that's what I was doing while I was putting the show together. Forgot to close that. As I said, gas prices. Here we are. This is from justthenews.com from their Center Square staff. And basically, gas prices are the highest they've been since 2014. Right in the middle of the Obama gas crisis. Right now, the national gas price average is at $3.09 per gallon. That's according to the AAA, another site called Gas Buddy. They put the national average at $3.11 a gallon. The article continues, as of Monday, some 89% of U.S. gas stations were charging $2.75 per gallon or more for regular unleaded. This is a stark increase over last July 4th, when only a quarter of stations were selling gas for more than $2.25, said AAA spokesperson Jeanette McGee. The national average in gas price over the holiday weekend in 2014 was $3.66. It dipped down to $3.17 per gallon by October, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The article also goes on to say that a lot of stations are running short of gas here and there, but it's not due to production cutbacks for the most part. Production's been cut back currently around 4% from previous numbers, but the big thing right now is a shortage of fuel truck drivers. Many of them were laid off when no one was traveling last year, and gas stations saw a severe drop in usage. And others found other jobs to make up for the loss in income and are not looking to come back. So the article states that you may come upon a station that has the sorry, out of service, or we're out of gas sleeves over their pumps, like you see in this picture here, but that may not last for more than a few hours or a day at most, and then they'll get a truck and they'll be back full up. But best of luck being able to afford a long trip this weekend. So as I teased at the beginning, got an article here from the AP. That's, I normally don't like to use the AP, but they're the direct progenitor of this article. This is written by Eric Tucker and Matt O'Brien. And we had congressional testimony yesterday from a Microsoft exec, and he said that getting requests for customers' records are basically commonplace. Tom Burt, Microsoft's corporate vice president for customer security and trust, told members of the House Judiciary Committee that federal law enforcement in recent years has been presenting the company with between 2,400 to 3,500 secrecy orders a year, or about 7 to 10 a day. Now again, that's not all of the orders that they get for people's data. That's just the number of secrecy orders, which means give us the data and don't tell the user that you did so. Keep them in the dark that someone's accessing their stuff. And these secrecy orders can go on for years and years and years. Judges tend to just approve them in a rubber stamp method. And Tom Burt, the Microsoft corporate vice president, also said that that's just the numbers for Microsoft. So imagine what Twitter and Google and Facebook are getting. I'm sure many times more, perhaps an order of magnitude more for any one of those companies, not much less all of them. Now, of course, both the left and right are looking at these orders. The right because of all the things that happened during the Trump administration against, or the incoming Trump administration against Carter Page and George Papadopoulos and Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. But the Democrats are also interested because remember that a number of people, including Congressman Adam Schiff for brains, were targeted by the intel communities. Schiff in particular for his possible role in leaking classified information garnered from his position on the House Select Committee for Intelligence. And the Trump administration also looked into the data of some reporters, also on the basis of large national security leaks that were provided to them. Now, yeah, I'm not a big fan of reporters being spied on by anyone. I think it's wrong. They're protected under the First Amendment unless they're seriously breaking the law, and I don't really see any of these instances of law breaking other than slander and libel against certain people for saying certain things. But the Obama administration just set a record for that. I mean, they made Lincoln look like a piker, and Lincoln shut down dozens of newspapers during the Civil War that were attacking him, and also lying about things that he was doing, that the Union Army was doing, and Lincoln would have none of it. He said, "This is wartime. You people are acting in a seditious manner, and I'm shutting you down." He jailed a lot of people too. But Obama went after everybody, and the press gave him a complete pass on it. That's interesting. When Jim Acosta was kicked off the White House beat for what turned out to be a couple weeks, when he refused to hand over a microphone during a presser and struggled with the page, just trying to hand the microphone to another reporter, the entire news media got behind Acosta, including Fox News. They got behind Acosta and said, you have to put him back on White House duty. You can't do that to a reporter. And Acosta did get reinstated. A judge ruled that the order kicking him off the White House press corps was invalid, and he had to be allowed back in. But now you've got Tucker Carlson making very, very specific and detailed allegations against the NSA, and the NSA basically confirming everything Tucker has said. Not a peep out of the rest of the media about a fellow reporter being basically illegally targeted by an agency that's not even supposed to have domestic surveillance capabilities. Not a peep. To which end, I would argue, Fox, shut up. Stop protecting the other guys. They hate you. They hate you. Stop sticking up for people that hate you. It's stupid. It makes you look weak. The next time one of those guys from CNN or MSNBC or the New York Times, whatever, the next time they get stepped on by someone in government, just shut up. It's my opinion. Moving right along. So we saw this coming. Speaking of big tech, you remember recently, back in late May, Governor DeSantis of Florida signed into law a bill that would prohibit, quote, a social media platform from willfully deplatforming a candidate. So case in point would be, even setting aside President Trump, Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer ran for Congress in Florida, and Twitter and Facebook immediately suspended her accounts. Now, Laura Loomer is a lightning rod. She has done some stupid things in her day. But so what? We all have. Perhaps not as publicly, some of us, but I'm sure I lead the way. But as a candidate, she deserved to have the same footing on social media as her opponents did. And she did not. She was muzzled. And again, that's just one Florida candidate. Now that Trump is a resident of Florida, this law would apply to him too. And it was predicted from the outset, we all agreed, that this law would be challenged in court. And it came down pretty quickly. A Clinton judge, yes, I'm going to make that distinction, a Clinton federal judge ordered a preliminary injunction blocking the law from taking effect. So now we have to go through the courts, which we all expected. The Democrats are going to try to drag this out as long as possible to keep it from being ruled constitutional by the time the 2022 election cycle gets into full swing. So I assume DeSantis and his team at the AG's office will be pushing for a quick resolution to this stuff. Now, here's the reasoning from the judge. Let me find it here. U.S. District Judge Robert Hinkle argued that banning, quote, deplatforming, close quote, likely violated the free speech rights of the tech companies, writing, quote, the legislation compels providers to host speech that violates their standards, speech they otherwise would not host, and forbids providers from speaking as they otherwise would. Well, that right there puts the lie to Section 230. What this judge is saying is they have the right to censor speech, which makes them publishers, which completely abrogates their rights that they claim to use as platforms under Section 230. This judge said these places are publishers. Period. That's what this ruling says. They're publishers. So what I see smart states doing is building upon this ruling by this federal district judge and saying, hey, look, the federal courts have ruled that you guys are publishers. Here come the penalties for your child porn, for your sex trafficking, for your hate speech against minorities that don't think the way the left wants them to think. Here it comes. Here comes the pain. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's, if I was running a state AG office and I had a hankering to mix it up with big tech, I would use this as a complete nuclear weapon against them. Michael Scriven says in the YouTube chat, Obama is why we have so much fake news. He removed the long-standing restriction of not allowing federal propaganda in mainstream news. That has arguably done the most damage. That's a very good point, sir. It's a very good point. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. That U.S. media was prohibited from performing propaganda duties, and Obama lifted that order. Another instance of the Obama administration being one of the most anti-constitutional governments ever. Thank you, good sir. Thank you. So speaking of deplatforming, you wouldn't think you'd hear of someone from the New York Times getting kicked off of Twitter. After all, the New York Times is the bastion of all things proper with the left. Well, every now and then, the New York Times does something called journalism and allowing a difference of opinion. And one of their writers did just that, and now they've been kicked off of Twitter for no stated reason. Excuse me. Just back on June 29th, just a couple days ago, New York Times posted a column, an opinion column by Bret Stephens. And in that piece, Stephens wrote, this article, by the way, is brought to you by Ben Johnson from the Daily Wire. In the piece, Stephens wrote that the drive to bring about intersexual, quote, equity, often designated by the term diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, quote, is insulting to everyone who still believes we should be judged by the content of our character. Stephens noted, for instance, that requiring Jewish employees to join, quote, whiteness accountability, close quote, is ludicrous given the ways white supremacists have victimized Jews at home and abroad. Stephens concluded, it shouldn't be hard to see that trying to solve the old racism with the new racism will produce even more racism. Justice is never achieved by turning the tables. And the very next day, Twitter suspended Stephens' account. Now, I fully expect Stephens to be tarred and feathered, set on fire, and thrown out the window of the highest floor of the New York Times building by the staff led by Nicole Hannah-Jones. I'm sure she'll be the one with the largest and sharpest pitchfork. And they also will be screaming for Dean Beckett's, or is it Baquet? I always forget. His head, the chief of the board. They'll be screaming for his head as well for daring publish a piece against their orthodoxy. We'll see how that shakes out. The last time this happened, the writer was fired. So a lot of dust has yet to settle. Interestingly enough, though, this whole thing of DEI and critical race theory intersectionalism. Ibram X. Kendi, who I forgot his real name. That's not his real name. That's his pseudonym. He actually has a normal American name. But Kendi, just the other day, was on, I think it was Joy Reid, and he said in almost as many words that anti-racism does not believe that all white people are racist. He said that, directly contradicting everything he has said for how long now? How many years has he said that to be white is to be racist? That's the entire basis of his book on anti-racism, a term that he coined. This is another example of gaslighting to the point where it's being released in tonnage that would raise the Earth's temperature by 5 degrees centigrade in a matter of hours. We've already heard this week Democrats saying, oh no, it's the Republicans who voted to defund the police because they didn't vote for that massive pork bill that included some money for police departments. Money that was fungible and could have been used for a great deal of other things other than actually putting more cops on the streets. They're the ones who've been talking about defunding the police, even though we started it and have said it over and over again, and the squad keeps saying it over and over again. And now that you've got Cori Bush and Jamal, what's his name? Bowman, I believe it is, from Missouri and New York, respectively. They've kind of joined the squad as well, and they've been screaming defund the police ever since they started running for office. Yeah, Jamal Bowman, yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. I saw another article today. I didn't have time to pull it in, but it's talking about how the new woke categories and reporting systems that are being placed on companies right now by the FEC are going to create billions of dollars in extra costs to them for adding extra people to the payrolls and extra systems to their companies to keep track of the insane minutia that these new woke policies require. It's absolutely amazing. So we didn't have a unanimous decision this time. Got an article from Reuters here by Andrew Chung. But John Roberts actually voted like a conservative this time. Amazed me. The Reuters article actually refers to the Supreme Court as being a 6-3 conservative court, which I find laughable. It is a 5-4 conservative court with 3 died in the wool. My math is bad. 5 originalist judges, 3 radically liberal judges, and Justice Roberts III, who is a squish of the magnitude never before seen on the Supreme Court, at least not since Roosevelt's days. The old stitch in time saves 9 bit, where the Supreme Court stopped ruling against all of Roosevelt's New Deal plans in order to keep him from packing the court. They basically said, okay, we'll do what you want us to do, just leave us alone. Pretty sad. But as I teased at the beginning of the show, this particular case had a 6-3 ruling, and it was about a Arizona election law. Not a recent election law, however. This one is from 2016. And it's very simple. It was about ballot harvesting. Arizona put strict limits on who could collect ballots and turn them in. Basically, the law stated that you had to be a direct relative or a caregiver to be able to turn in someone else's ballot. And the Democrats lost their living S and sued. And it went all the way up to SCOTUS. And today, which is the last day for SCOTUS rulings before they take their summer break, and come back in October, they ruled 6-3 that this is completely legitimate and that it does not violate the Voting Rights Act. Now, of course, the Democrats are insanely over the top mad about this. Quoting our dear leader 46 asterisk, the ruling, quote, makes clear that than ever that additional laws are needed to safeguard that beating heart of our democracy. We don't have a democracy. This is a constitutional republic. The Democrats want it to be a democracy. That's why they keep saying that. They want to turn this into a purely 50% plus one vote country, because most of the time liberals outnumber conservatives. It's just the nature of the beast. People tend not to become conservative until they're older. I'm saying tend, not always, but tend. That's also why the Democrats want 16-year-olds to be able to vote, because 16-year-olds are no information voters who just basically do what they're told. Or will vote on pure emotion, which is exactly what the Democrats want. They don't want you to know what's going on. They want you to vote on emotion. That's why they make everyone think that Republicans are Nazis and racists. Because if you actually look at Republican policies and how they're designed to help people as opposed to hold them back, they would have a greater chance of not only getting into Congress, but turning some of these insanely Democrat stronghold cities into actually functioning urban centers. Remember, all these calls to defund the police, systemic racism in the police department, etc., 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 it's the same people running these places for some 60 years or more. The same people, just different names. And suddenly, it's the Republicans' fault because of what they've been doing, the Democrats, all these decades. The Republicans are the racist ones for making minority kids go to crap schools and live in crap housing that the state has direct influence in fixing up or having torn down and replaced. The same systems that create bail reform, quote unquote, and allow criminals to just come in and out of the system without a care in the world. And I've got a case coming up in the after show to explain how that's been working in the King County area and Sonoma County area in Washington State for years and years. A system that other states have used as a model, even though it hasn't produced any real data since 2014. Yet it keeps getting refunded and copied. But as far as voting goes, if the Democrats had their way, there would be no voter ID. There would be absolute, universal mail-in balloting with no checks and balances on voter rolls. So once someone's on the voter roll, they would be there permanently, whether or not they moved, whether or not they died. Their status as a Democrat or Republican would not change if they didn't want to change it. So people who change parties would be getting their previous party's ballots with no real ability to change them out. So they would have to vote in person. They would make it completely plausible for illegals to vote by the busload, because not only would you not have to show an ID, but they would also demand same-day registration be available, and there would be zero accountability for improper ballots being cast, both against the Board of Elections and against the person who casts the vote illegally. It would basically decriminalize voter fraud in every aspect. That's what HR1, SR1 were all about. And you've got this president saying that basically the Supreme Court has ruled that racists are allowed to run elections. That's read between the lines. That's what they're saying. Racists are being allowed to run elections. Moving right along. So something we've talked about fairly often is the complete fracturing of the left. I had mentioned last year, after it looked like we'd lost the election, honk honk, that Biden was in for a lot of trouble because he had a three-way split in his party. Especially two ways between the completely out of its mind radical left and the quote-unquote moderates like him. Of course, we've all seen he's been anything but a moderate. Ever since he came into office, he's been the exact opposite. But it still isn't good enough for the left. He hasn't gotten $15 an hour minimum wage through. He hasn't canceled student loan debts. And he hasn't federalized the police in this country and defunded all local police departments. Certainly hasn't brought all the quote-unquote killer cops to jail, as they're, demanding. All one of them a year. Remember, they're trying to charge Derek Chauvin. I should say trying to. They charged, and I believe are getting a plea deal from Derek Chauvin over civil rights violations in the death of George Floyd, even though there is not one atom of evidence that what happened between Chauvin and Floyd had anything to do with racism. Not one electron's worth of information shows that. Yet, we're told over and over again that the racist nature of the Minneapolis Police Department, and Officer Chauvin in particular, is what justified the $2 billion worth of insurance claims that were filed last year due to the rioting, looting, and arson from the insurrectionists. And another problem that they have had is with the incredible rise in anti-Semitism in the party. We're constantly told that it's the white supremacists, the Nazis, the KKKers, who are the problem, who are the danger to the society. Everyone in the federal government right now is saying that we have to watch out for the white supremacists because they are the most dire threat to this country, even replacing climate change. When was the last time you heard a Democrat talk about climate change? Now it's all about the whites. But they never name any of the groups. They never name any people specifically involved in these groups. It's just them. Those guys. Them. Worry about them. Don't worry about the fact that we have a huge, solid block of anti-Semites leading our party in messaging and being completely unapologetic about it. In fact, blaming the Jews for their being anti-Semites. And the case in point is Ilhan Omar yet again. Remember, she married her brother to get him into the United States. She's like, no, he's not my brother. We're married. I'm a citizen. He can come in now. As soon as he gets over here, they get divorced. And then she lives with the guy while filing taxes jointly with her husband, with whom she is still married, even though she's living with another guy. And they're filing jointly, even though they're not sharing the same domicile. And then she marries the other guy in a religious ceremony, but not legally. And so now she's married to two guys at the same time until she finally divorces the other guy. And then she sleeps around on the second guy, has an affair with a political consultant, and funnels over $1 million of campaign funds into his company including after they moved in together once they got caught. And there's no law against that, I guess. And these are the people driving the Democrat Party. And Nancy Pelosi is supposed to be this big political strategist, the person who always has her eye on the prize, knows exactly what to do when. Yet she is completely cowed by the squad. And so is Biden. Rashida Tlaib, some weeks ago, made some pretty anti-Semitic comments during the rocket attacks by Hamas onto Israel last month. Some 4,500 rockets fired indiscriminately into populated areas. A third of them falling into Gaza itself and killing Hamas citizens. Yet it was Israel was the the human rights violator for defending themselves with Iron Dome and knocking out missile systems and terrorist tunnels. And Rashid Tlaib, when Biden went to Michigan to read yet another teleprompter in front of a handful of people at a factory somewhere, she buttonholed him on the tarmac because she was part of that group. And actually I think she did put her finger in Biden's face, at least up to his chest. She definitely got very upfront. And you could see she was shouting. But the jet APU was going, the auxiliary power unit, so you couldn't hear her. And then at the podium during this event, Biden praised Tlaib for her intelligence and her courage, after she had compared Israel to a terrorist organization and called it an apartheid state and genocide, yada, 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 the same old leftist talking points. So Pelosi was asked this morning during her weekly press conference if she had anything to say about Omar's last comment. Omar was asked about if she was going to apologize at all for comparing the United States and Israel to Hamas and Hezbollah. And not only did Omar not apologize for it, she blamed the Jewish lawmakers who were criticizing her for being the ones who were at fault. And someone asked Pelosi about that this morning, and Pelosi blew off the question completely. Just blew it off. I'm not going to talk about that. Let's move on. You remember, back in, I think it was 2019, when Omar went off on a series of anti-Semitic tweets and statements. I think 3 within 4 weeks. And the Republicans tried to bring a resolution to the House floor to censor Omar for this these attacks. And the Democrats had control of the House, and Pelosi turned this censure of Omar into a broad, we're against hate speech of all kinds, including white supremacy and left out anti-Semitism. Or left it to the very end. I forget now. One of those two. But instead of censoring the actual cause of the problem, Pelosi made it to where, well, we'll all have to watch out for this kind of stuff. Let's let sleeping dogs lie. Yeah, so Pelosi's completely lost control of the House, and she knows it. And the left and the squad knows it. And they're leading her around by her nose. Which is great for us, because Pelosi is going to be forced to bring all kinds of radical, out-of-control bills to the floor that don't have a prayer of getting through the Senate. Now, according to some people, Pelosi says that that's the grand strategy, that by making the Republicans look to be obstructionists, that will give the Democrats the upper hand in 2022. I think that's incredibly short-sighted thinking. Incredibly short-sighted thinking, because you look at where the country is right now. Look at the polling we've talked about just in the last week regarding this administration's handling of the economy and foreign affairs and the border, energy, and the country's complete backing by 80% for voter ID and other common sense election laws. These are the exact things the Democrats are fighting against as a party. I talked about school choice yesterday, how a huge majority of parents from all walks, Democrat, Republican, black, white, all of them believe not only is school choice very important to them, but also that they believe that the COVID funding for schools should be handed out by the parents, not by the school board. That the parents should decide where that money goes. Another thing in direct contradiction to the Democrat party's being the cat's paw of the teachers' unions. And all they can do now is try to gaslight the country into believing that they're not the ones doing it. It's the Republicans that are doing it. A year ago, I would have been worried about that more than I am now. But look at the ratings for MSNBC and CNN. They are plummeting. MSNBC not so much, but CNN is hemorrhaging viewers, down some 70% over this time last year. Down 50% since January, at the height of their powers, January 10th, I believe, with their biggest ratings day in quite some time. And now they can't even draw 1 million people. Average. Primetime. Not even close. Their number one show, primetime, is Cuomo's ridiculous pantomime. Although I tell you, he's the best steroid-abusing political commentator out there. I'm sorry, journalist. Journalist, my bad. Journalist. As far as steroid abusers go, he's definitely the top of the line. In my opinion. Hush, kitty cat. I'm working. Yes, I am. But no one's watching them anymore. Certainly not the youth demo, the 18 to 30, 44, 45 demo, the most important advertising demo out of all the different demographic groups. No one is watching them, and those are the most impressionable voters. Meanwhile, Fox is killing it. Cuomo was their highest rated show, and I believe he came in behind Andy Griffith reruns on WeTV. I covered that story just the other day, so he'd correct me if I'm wrong. But the Democrats are killing themselves. And I will quote Ben Shapiro, "Never interrupt your opponent when they're making a mistake." If the Republicans can go on the offensive and stop reacting to everything and start putting the Democrats on the defensive, which should be child's play right now, considering where they're at, I foresee great things ahead. But unfortunately, Republicans are known for snatching defeat from the jaws of victory quite often. So we'll have to see. I mean, Obama, in 2012, his polls were down. He was hemorrhaging votes. And somehow the Republicans came up with a really great plan to blow the election. And we got 4 more years of that jerk because of it. Now, this story really caught my eye because it's gossip, it's DC, and it's Harris. And it's all bad. It's all bad. Politico. I don't go to Politico all that often, but every now and then they do a story that's really worth looking at, and this one is right up there. It's written by Christopher Catalago, Daniel Littman, and Eugene Daniels. I don't know why these places always have to have multiple reporters on the same story, but they did. And to boil the story down into a nutshell, people in Harris's office hate her, but they especially hate her chief of staff. And it's not just the people working there. It's people who have been supporting Harris for years as big-time donors and other supporters. They're being frozen out of communicating with Harris by her top aide. And most of the people, if not all of them, around Harris weren't picked by her. Because you remember, she had a group for her presidential run, and they all left or were fired. It was one of the worst run campaigns in presidential history. And it's still bad. People feel they're being ignored or belittled or both. If something goes wrong, instead of the decision that was made at the top being the fault, being the reason for it, it's always someone else's fault, someone down the chain. Where's a bus we need to throw under this assistant? It talks about the El Paso trip. The office was saying for weeks and weeks and months, we're not going to the border. We're not going to the border. We don't need to. We're going to deal with the root cause by only visiting Guatemala and Mexico and then flying home to California. She still hasn't gone anywhere but Guatemala and Mexico and El Paso for 2 hours. She held a press conference at the airport with a jet engine running. Again, it probably was the auxiliary power unit for the aircraft, which are basically jet engines that run generators instead of the propulsion. And you could barely hear her over the jet engine. That was the famous press conference, though, where the one border representative from Congress, who was a Harris supporter, referred to El Paso as the new Ellis Island. Once again, saying the quiet part out loud. Excuse me just a second. And it's hilarious. It's just hilarious. Now, of course, this article would be remiss if it didn't quote the common knowledge that the only reason people are saying this is because Harris and her chief of staff are black. That Harris's lack of interpersonal skills and ability to belittle people at the drop of a hat, that's not true. She just has a tough style of running things, and what would be fine for a white person to do, a white man to do, is of course completely out of bounds to accuse a black woman of doing that. Skullcram says in the DLF chat, Europe is the other way. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Ted Cruz had a great line on Hannity the other night. It was Hannity the other night, where he said, Chicago is closer to Washington, D.C. than El Paso is to the Rio Grande Valley. I thought that was hilarious. And Hannity laughed his ass off. It was too good of a line. Too good of a line. But here's the part of the article that made me laugh. So the Harris's chief of staff, her last name is Flournoy. So here's the best paragraph in the article. Harris and Flournoy's defenders also note that women in power, black women in particular, are subjected to standards that men don't often have to clear. A tough and demanding office environment may be seen as a virtue for one and a sign of disorder and lack of leadership acumen for another. Continuing, though, but for some of the people who know Harris best, it's become an all too familiar pattern for a politician who has churned through several iterations of staff on her rise and took office with a team almost entirely new to her. People are saying that they're being ignored, and that people who were very, very influential in getting Harris picked to be the VP nominee are being shut out by Flournoy. Their calls aren't being returned, their emails aren't being answered, and they're certainly not being allowed to see Harris, not even for 5 minutes. And not a good idea, in my opinion, to turn your back on people who bundled millions of dollars in campaign donations to you when you were running for president, and are going to be needed again if you run in 2024. She's burning bridges left and right, according to this article. Now, there's still plenty of time to make up for it, but people in politics tend to have long memories. Long memories. Let me give you a quote from one of the friends of Harris. Quote, "This is someone who has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions even, for your boss, and you're just blowing them off? Next time Kamala wants them for something, it's like, hey, I couldn't even get a call back from your chief of staff." So, and as far as the El Paso trip goes, that blindsided everybody. I lost my train of thought there. I apologize. The El Paso trip blindsided everybody. It was announced without any discussion with the staff at all, and it was rushed. You remember Harris said she was going to the border, quote unquote, the border, and then the next week she was there, and none of the advance work was done with any kind of alacrity or efficiency. So it was all just a show, and the office was absolutely losing it. We're going to go a little long on YouTube today, folks. We're going to go a little long. So speaking of black women in power who have a habit of making people hate them, is Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago. You remember, Chicago had a choice between two black lesbians for mayor, and they chose Lori Lightfoot. And Lori Lightfoot has been on the hot seat for a long time because of her temperament. She is at best irascible. Is that how that's pronounced, irascible? I can never remember. Also, another way of putting it is she's a B word, and she's constantly getting in verbal fights, not challenges, but fights with aldermen and other city officials, people whom she needs to get things done. She's also been attacking the police department left and right. And so I found a opinion piece from, pardon me, no, this is not an opinion piece. This is from the politics section of the Chicago Tribune, written by Gregory Pratt. And it echoes what Harris is saying, that the criticism, according to Mayor Lightfoot, is 99% because she's a black woman. 1% of the criticism that Lori Lightfoot gets, according to her, is actually valid. 99% of it is because she's a black woman. She didn't bring up the lesbian part for some reason. Maybe it's because it was Pride Month. I don't know. But that was an interview on Channel 11, which is Chicago's PBS station, WTTW. I used to be a subscriber to WTTW. I was a monthly subscriber. I got all kinds of goodies from them, including a subscription to Chicago Magazine, which is a great magazine. At least it used to be. I don't know now. But I read it cover to cover every week. I loved it. Really great magazine. Gave you a lot of ideas to what to do. And Chicago was not a very long drive from where I lived when I grew up. Not a very long drive at all. And I was more than happy to drive in Chicago. So I could read a map at age 6. So no problem for me. But this is a quote from Lightfoot. When asked about how much of the criticism has to do with the fact that she's a black woman, which is a stupid question in and of itself, Lightfoot said, about 99%. Continuing the quote, "Look at my predecessors. Did people say that Rich Daley held tea sessions with people that he disagreed with? Rahm Emanuel was a polite guy who was a uniter? No. Women and people of color are always held to a different standard. I understand that. I've known that my whole life." Rahm Emanuel was also known as being a real dick when it came to dealing with people. I mean, he was notorious for that. And so Lightfoot just carried on with the standard. Continuing with the article, at least a dozen top people have resigned or said they're on their way out since late last year. City Hall jobs are difficult even during normal circumstances, and the pressure intensified in the past year with the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, followed by bouts of civil unrest. Some of the departures are part of the natural rhythm within a mayoral term, which Lightfoot alluded to during a spring conference. Current and former Lightfoot advisors, however, complain that she doesn't take advice and can be difficult to approach. Like her predecessor, Emanuel, Lightfoot is known to be profane and hard-charging with other elected officials, once telling aldermen, and I'm going to quote this verbatim, "Don't come to me for shit," close quote, if they voted against her budget. She can also be tough on her staff. Last May, Lightfoot emailed her chief of staff, her deputy mayor for economic development, and scheduler a photo of ripped-up documents. You may have also seen, we covered the story, where Lightfoot set out a series of emails in which she repeated sentences, very hostile sentences, a dozen times or more on 3 separate occasions. On one occasion, 16 times, I believe it was, I demand office hours, or I demand enough office hours. I demand that I have my office hours. 16 times. Just all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Movie reference. Movie reference. Skullcram says in the D-Live chat, he sort of led her a chitty chai town. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But she had every opportunity to do better. She promised she would. And she's been in 2 years now, and things have only gotten incredibly worse. Incredibly worse. And the crime is absolutely running away. Now she's asking for federal help. Of course, when she needed it the first time last year, when things could have been settled down and put a lid on, that couldn't happen because Trump's a racist and Nazi. And, she told him to F off, that she knows how to run her city. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thanks, Lori. Now, this is the editorial that I was referencing. I apologize. Here's a great picture of Lightfoot, by the way, getting into it with Alderman Jeanette Taylor from the 20th Ward. And they had a city council meeting, and Jeanette Taylor was part of an alderman block who were voting against a pick of Lightfoot's for corporate attorney. I don't know if it was a salary thing or what. By the way, check out the... Oh, never mind. I saw something I didn't see. But Lightfoot and Taylor got into it. And Lightfoot kept cutting Taylor off. I wouldn't let her speak. And so the meeting was suddenly called an adjournment. And you can see here that black woman got into the face of that other black woman. So I guess that's racism on the part of Alderman Jeanette Taylor. What are you going to do? But this Chicago Sun-Times editorial, just from June 25th, that last article on Lightfoot's 99% black woman causal for her criticisms, that was on June 30th. And this one from June 25th, again, the Chicago Tribune. If the Tribune isn't behind you in Chicago, you're not doing well at all. And the headline to the editorial reads, add to Chicago's problems our defensive, irascible mayor. I don't remember how to pronounce that. But the opinion piece has some pretty strong words against Lightfoot. I'll quote the last two sentences. There is a line between being principled, which she'd say she is, and being impractical. Lightfoot routinely crosses it to the detriment of the city she's been hired to serve. And again, that's the Chicago Tribune, the main influencer in Chicago. The Sun-Times is number 2. I mean, the Sun-Times has a very, very definitive fan base, but the Tribune's the old girl. I was always a big fan of the Tribune, even though Royko and Ebert wrote for the Sun-Times. So I would pick up the Sun-Times to read them, but I normally just read Royko's anthologies. Same with Ebert's. Skullcram says, when you get all 5 fingers in your face, you know you've done something wrong. Yeah, very good. Very good. All right. Yeah, like I said, we're going long on YouTube today. I'll hit this real quickly. This is an article from the or I should say a release from the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. Again, I can say it in my head. I just can't read it and say it at the same time because I'm a speed reader. I trip over words. But basically, 80% of San Franciscans believe that homelessness should be a top priority, that 70% feel the quality of life in San Francisco has declined, and 88% see homelessness as having worsened in recent years. 74% of San Franciscans supported providing more temporary shelter for homeless individuals. And people are leaving San Francisco at a very, very high rate. And to quote the article, the results were consistent across gender, age, ethnicity, party affiliation, and neighborhood and homeowner status. I will have to take the people to task here. They did not use a semicolon in between these clauses, as they should have. But that's just me being pedantic. But yeah, 70% of residents for the second year in a row feel that the quality of life in San Francisco has declined. Skullcram says in the D-Live chat, such a waste that the beautiful Bay Area has been ruined. Oh, that San Francisco is really the jewel city of the United States, even though I believe that's technically the city slogan for Seattle. But San Francisco has always really been the jewel, but not anymore. It's completely gone to hell. You can't even afford to live there. You don't want to live there. It's like the old Jewish joke where two people are at a restaurant and someone says, the food here is terrible. And the other says, yes, and the portions are so small. That's San Francisco. The housing prices are it's horrible to live there, and the housing prices are too high. So just, why would you be there? Why would you be there is the question that begs to be asked. So touching real quickly, again on California, tax prices for gasoline are going up 0.6 cents. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a whole lot, 0.6 cents. The gas tax was passed back in 2017, obviously not taking effect until now. Typical of governors to put the ball in the future so the other guy has to make the layup. But with this rise, the gas tax in California, when you include state and local and county, can be more than 51 cents a gallon. Now, you might say, well, yeah, but California needs the money, right? Here's the thing. California has a massive budget surplus right now, believe it or not. And I don't think that includes the money they got from that big pork bailout that Congress passed through reconciliation back in February or March. In fact, according to this article from justthenews.com by the Center Square staff, California has a budget surplus of $75 billion at the moment. $75 billion surplus, and they're raising gas taxes as opposed to lowering them. Scully says in the D-Live chat, and electric cars ride tax-free. Yeah, yeah. And they suck up power in the grid and make it harder for people who have, electrically cooled homes survivable during the hot summer months. So I teased this story at the beginning, and I'll touch on it very briefly here. Governor Pritzker in Illinois will soon be signing into law a bill that requires feminine hygiene products in boys' bathrooms through grades 4 through 12. Boys' bathrooms. This is supposed to be because a trans could need that in case of an emergency. That's a quote from a state senator, Karina Villa, Democrat, West Chicago. And she said the measure was an effort to end period poverty. During a debate, State Senator Jill Tracy, Republican Quincy, asked Villa why feminine hygiene products needed to be provided in boys' bathrooms. Villa responded, quote, in case of an emergency. Tracy said, this is not a good answer. We've got to quit playing these stupid, silly games here and get real and get fiscally responsible. Here's my favorite quote, though. This is from State Rep Avery Bourne. Quote, when you give a grade school boy something that's adhesive, they're going to put it in places. These products are not inexpensive, and they are going to be misused if they are placed in elementary school boys' bathrooms. The chilling part of this article, though, is the final paragraph. Illinois is one of more than a dozen states considering bills to require school to provide free feminine hygiene products, although few have included boys' restrooms. Right up there with the wage gap, folks. Period poverty. Gotcha. Can't read that aloud, Michael. Can't read that aloud, but well put. All right, YouTube. We have finished your part of the show. I gave you a little extra today after cutting you short last week. I hope it was worth the effort. I will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern for another hour of the News Rodeo on YouTube. And, of course, if you care to join me, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, Eastern Time, I will be continuing my playthrough of Far Cry 5. We finished one of the first being captured, missions in the Whitetail District just today. I'm going to be going back to Faith Seed's area, Hellbane River, and clearing out a bunch of cult outposts there. We'll do a lot of that tomorrow. And then 4 p.m. for the News Rodeo. And remember, weekends, 9 a.m. Eastern is when we start the Far Cry streams. There will not be an afternoon gaming stream Saturday night. I will be showing the Save America rally from Florida, at which President Trump will be speaking. That'll be his first rally without having a political candidate to back. You remember he did that one in Ohio last week. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of talk about the border and energy and things like that. It'll be fascinating. I will not be broadcasting Trump on YouTube. I'll start the show on YouTube, but once Trump shows up, if you want to watch him, you're going to have to come to D-Live, Trovo, or Twitch. Because if Trump says anything about the election that YouTube doesn't like, there goes my channel for a week. And I can't afford that. So let's keep that in mind. So sign up for D-Live or Trovo early. You can sign up for Twitch if you want, but Twitch doesn't have microtransactions, so you're just kind of stuck there. But I do believe there are ways to donate on Twitch, but I'm not interested in them. I think D-Live and Trovo are much better options. So, good people, I will see you soon. Bye-bye.